You're listening to Creatives Crushing Anxiety, the podcast for online business creatives looking to minimize their anxiety and maximize their productivity through systems organization and time management. I'm your host, Melody Dowlearn. Let's do this. Hello, today I have Melody from Tridentity Coaching.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about our conversation.
Me too. So can you tell everyone a little bit about what you actually do?
Sure, absolutely. I coach individuals in the areas of health, life, and identity, depending on what they're struggling with, because we are, in my opinion, or in my belief, we are triune beings and we are different parts, but we are the sum of our parts. And so I help people where they're struggling to break through barriers, go past limitations, just go beyond where they've been able to go in the past. And I help them find their best life and move forward.
I love that. And I think that the audience can definitely appreciate what you do, because that, like everything you just said, is so true. We're the sum of all of our parts. And if one part is off, then you start to see a ripple effect in like the whole presentation of it. So when I discovered you and I like kind of went down the little internet rabbit hole and you were talking about boundaries, I was like, I have to see if she'll come on the show, because I like boundaries. I've done episodes on boundaries and it's so huge to me as an individual. And I know that you have a really interesting way of kind of explaining the physical boundaries that we perceive and then the emotional. So if you'd love to break that down.
Sure, absolutely. I love to talk about boundaries because boundaries, are the lack of boundaries, should I say, really keeps many of us from reaching our fullest potential. And so a lot of us struggle with boundaries. And, there's this kind of perception that if I say no, or that if I set this boundary, then people are going to think that I'm mean and, I'm not going to be accepted, or I'm going to hurt someone's feelings. And so what happens is, because we fear setting boundaries, because we don't understand the power and the benefit of boundaries, and not just for ourselves, but even for those around us, that we fail to set them. And then we're frustrated and we're bitter and we're resentful, which is honestly what none of us really want to be. Right? Yeah. Life's short to live like that. And so a lot of times with my clients, who struggle with boundaries, I take it to the physical, right? So for example, in the morning when you get up and you go to work, you get on the on-ramp, right, to your freeway, your highway, and you get in the lane, and there's a merge lane. And then you stay with the flow of traffic until it's safe to change lanes. And then I would imagine that there is a speed limit sign posted on your route to work. And so that speed limit sign tells you it's safe to go up to this speed. And I would also imagine that there's a traffic light somewhere on the route to your office. And so what these are, and what we don't realize, these are boundaries. These are boundaries that govern how fast we can go, what lane we can be in, when we stop, when we yield. And so therefore it facilitates the flow of traffic. It facilitates safety, it facilitates cohesiveness, and we all can get to work.
Yeah.
Right. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, of course. And so then imagine the converse. Wonder if you got up one morning, you went up on the highway, you merged on, and there's no lines. They'd all been erased. There's no speed limit signs posted, right? Oh. All traffic lights aren't working in town. Do you think that anybody could get where they're going? Absolutely. Not. No one's going to have a good day. There's going to be no productivity. So, and when I explain it that way, people are like, oh yeah, that would be awful. Right. So why can we, get around physical boundaries in our life, and we embrace those and they govern our life, and we don't even realize it because we're so conditioned to those boundaries. And then yet we struggle at an interpersonal level to set boundaries.
That's perfect. I love like that example of it, because when you put it like that, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. Because it feels like boundaries are this big mountain to climb. Yes. And it's like you have tons of them already. You're just not even aware that that's what it is. Like it's telling you what's okay and what's not okay. And that's the same thing with your boundaries. It's telling people what's okay and what's not okay. And Absolutely. What you will accept and what you want to accept. So I love that example.
Yes. And I think it's something else that's really interesting is that, like you said, we don't even realize how many boundaries govern our lives. It's just, we're conditioned to them and we don't resist them because we understand them. We actually rely on them. They're necessary. And so no one questions them. And actually, if the boundaries that we don't even realize disappeared, our lives would be in complete chaos and turmoil. Nothing would happen. And so, when you think about your internal boundaries or the boundaries that you set with relationships around you, it becomes very clear that, yeah, when I begin to set those, after a while, they become my default. And then people don't resist them anymore because they've been in place so long, and then everybody's on the same page. And now I'm not mean. I'm a very healthy person.
And I think that it's interesting that you brought up the whole people resisting them when you first set them up, because I've worked with so many different people who are having to teach people, retrain them what's okay and what's not okay, but whether it's a personal or professional relationship, because that's what they've allowed for so long. So when they say, okay, I need a boundary, there's a, wait, what? This isn't how we've done things before. But when you start, if you're starting a new client relationship and you start with those boundaries, that's always the expectation. And it doesn't mean that you can't create boundaries in existing relationships. But I think it is important to note that just because they're going to come and say, oh, well, this isn't how we've done it before, doesn't mean that you can't still hold that boundary and make that change.
Yes, absolutely. That is a great point. I'm reminded of my first year as a high school teacher. No one taught us boundaries. And so I had no frame of, I had no context for teaching high school students anyway, no framework for that. And it was nothing for which I was trained. And I remember that first semester, I was crying. I was hiding under my desk. It was because I had no boundaries. It was my fault. I was enabling the chaos, unintentionally. But I was really responsible for what was going on in the classroom because I was not setting boundaries. And so I did a lot of processing and hard thinking over the Christmas break. And I came back with boundaries. And oh my God, the kids fought me tooth and nail. And it was painful that first 6 weeks because they're like, this is not our teacher. She was so hip. She was so awesome. She's one of us. Who are you? So I had to fight to establish those boundaries, but it made me a much better teacher. Learning was now happening in the classroom. Kids felt safer because they knew what to expect, and every day was consistent from that point on. So, if you find yourself in this place where you feel like you need to set some boundaries, but you're scared of the pain point, so to speak, the truth is there's going to be one, but this too shall pass, right? It's not going to be forever. And, like anything, it's hard at the beginning, but you are worth the investment of boundaries. You are worth the sacrifice. You are worth the pain points, and in the resistance that you're going to get at the very beginning. But long-term, it really pays off.
So I think it's really interesting that you said, you kind of allowed that to happen. So what are your perceptions, or what would you say to someone about the power that they have to actually create the boundaries that they need in their lives?
Yeah, you have what you need to create the space where you can exist at your fullest level. And a lot of people don't realize the power to set boundaries is within you. And if you don't believe that's true, look at the atmosphere around you, look at your environment, look at the chaos, look at what is driving you crazy. Okay. You allow that to happen, whether or not you want to admit that, or whether that's fun to think about. Part of that is your responsibility. So in a way, you still created the environment around you by not setting boundaries, by not stepping up in the fullness and in the truth of who you are, by not occupying the space that is for you and not setting healthy boundaries. You've allowed the chaos. You're partially responsible for that. So if you can be partially responsible for the chaos, you can be absolutely fully responsible for the space that you need to function in, the space to create a space that serves you at your fullest capacity.
I love that. I love that you just spotlighted that, because it's true. So often we're in situations where we may feel powerless, but it's at the end of the day, you do hold some of that power. You may not be able to control that it's raining outside, or that your pipe broke or whatever, but you are controlling how you respond to it and what you do as a result of it.
Right.
So I am curious though, how do you deal with when you have a client or you're working with someone and they're saying, I've tried to set this boundary, this person does not respect it, and they get to the point where it's time to walk away from that relationship, be it personal or professional, because they won't respect the boundaries?
Right. No, I've had a lot of those conversations, and sometimes there's just hard truths. And, a lot of times I think we know things about people. We really know the truth of the relationship We really do. Okay. Whether or not we're acknowledging it or doing anything about it. And so what happens is when you set a boundary, you force a demand, right?
Mhm.
Because when you show up in a new way, your atmosphere has no choice but to respond. And that response isn't always warm and happy.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Facts.
you get that negative feedback. There is that relationship, that boss, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the neighbor, whoever it is, who absolutely refuses to honor the boundary you've set. So when that happens, you have to make a choice. Really, it falls on you. Are you going to continue to try to negotiate your boundaries with this person? Are you going to continue a relationship with somebody who cannot honor you, who cannot honor your boundaries? And if they don't honor your boundaries, then you really need to question that relationship to begin with. Is it a healthy relationship? Does it bring value to your life, right? Is it helping you get to where you're trying to go, or is it holding you back? And so this really becomes tricky when it's immediate family members. We can podcast about that for
Yes.
hours. That's when you need therapy. No, but if it's one of those relationships that you can cut, then I say cut it and move on, because not all relationships are supposed to walk with you through all seasons of your life. And sometimes we grow and we expand as a person, and those friendships don't grow with us. And those individuals refuse to shift, and they don't want to go with us where we're going. They want to stay where they've always been, and they want to do business as usual. And that's really where it comes down to. You have to make some tough choices. Where do you want to be in a year from now? Who do you want to be as a person? What cycles or patterns in your life are you trying to break? And what are your priorities? And when you look at it in those terms of valuing yourself, valuing your dreams, valuing your process, I think it makes it very simple. It can be messy, yes, but it's a choice. It's very clear what needs to be done. And sometimes adios.
I am shaking my head so much while she's talking, because all of this is so true. And it brought up the fact that like I gotten to a point where I am just very clear on what is okay for me and what is acceptable, both professionally and personally. And in the past few months, there was a situation in a romantic relationship where I was like, these are my boundaries. This is what I need. And when that person couldn't meet them, I was like, okay, that was it. And because I knew that I had set the expectation of like, this is what I'll accept and this is what I won't accept, it wasn't like the biggest heartbreak that it normally would have been had I not set the boundaries, because I was like, I showed up, I did my part. I said what I was open to and what I'm not. And it gives you some sort of freedom, because like I did what I need to do, even though it's hard, even though it's not always even having the conversation of setting that boundary, I was like super awkward during it. But I was like, I got it out. I said what I needed to say. And regardless of what happens, I'm going to be okay, because I'm protecting what I need and what I value.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's tough. You may have felt awkward. And the first time you set a boundary, it does feel awkward. But what's so cool about that is it empowers you, because you're like, you know what? I did the right thing for me in this moment. And I know I made the right choice. And wow, I could do that again. It wasn't, I'm still alive, right? There's still people in my life who love me, right? I'm not completely alone and dejected and all by myself. It can feel like that when you lose somebody, but you have to remind yourself. And that's also a really kind of a good idea to make sure when you do enter into relationships and friendships, whatever they are, the ones you can control, that you really link up with people who have a strong sense of identity, who know who they are, and it's not that, we're going to ignore all dysfunctional, hurting people. No, of course not. And there's things where you walk with people, but when we're talking about your inner circle, right? And you build that inner circle, the people that, you're ride or die, you want people who can set boundaries as well, and who understand that and who understand their identity and who they are. And then you're just stronger together, and you're not just pulling someone else's dead weight.
That's so true. That's so spot on, because I don't want to be in a friendship, relationship, working relationship with someone who can't express what they need. And then they're harboring resentment. And it's like, oh, I didn't even know this was an issue for you, because you've never said it. And people can't act the way you want them to act, or do the things that you need them to do sometimes, unless you tell them, because everyone's different. Everyone's needs are different. What may be offensive to me may not be offensive to you. What may be triggering for me may not be triggering to you. And by stating that and saying and sometimes it will be situational where something will come up and it'll happen. And that's the first time it's ever happened. And that's your opportunity to say, hey, I was super upset that you just said that. And I don't think that you meant it this way, but this is what that means to me. And here's why. So can we not do that again? Like just having those conversations that feel so difficult, but the people who you want in your life, the type of people you want around you are going to be the ones who are like, oh, I didn't realize. Okay, let's move forward.
Yes, absolutely. No, very well said. And yeah, I think the struggle, and I think the big piece of this, or the biggest struggle that I see with my clients, or it's the relationships that have been there for a long time. It's where they feel the responsibility. Like those are really the hardest ones, I think, to set boundaries with. But again, I always often use the analogy, if you had a small child, or if maybe you're listening, you're not a parent, maybe you had a small brother or sister, and they want to run out the front door into the street, and you're not going to let them, right? You're not going to let them do that. You're going to bring them back in, and they might throw a fit. It might be awkward, but you're doing what's best for them. You're protecting them. And that's really what boundaries do. They said, it protects me, it protects you. It keeps this relationship healthy, and it keeps everybody in a good place, and it keeps us all functioning and moving forward. And so it can be painful. You might lose some, there might be some casualties along the way, but as a long-term, investment, that's really the only way to go. And if you step back, and look at it from a macro perspective, like over your life, the course of your life, like the next 10 years, setting a few boundaries is not a big deal. You have to get out of the moment and the emotion of it, and then free yourself up from the responsibility of hurting all these people or angering people, and just make the investment and really begin to think about what you need, where, and a lot of people don't even know where to begin. And so this is another, I think, helpful tip is, where is the space right now where you have the most resentment, the most frustration that you're not able to voice? That's where you probably need a boundary.
Oh, yes to all of that. And I love also giving the analogy of like a small child, because I was actually babysitting a friend's little girl this week, and she's the cutest girl in the world, and she's so sweet. She's about 9 months old, but she would like want to just basically dive off the couch and it's like, no, you can't do that. Like I protect, and then she'd get fussy and mad at me for like restricting her. And I'm like, I'm looking out for you. I'm setting the boundary that you don't realize you need. Yes. So that's a great example. I know we kind of like touched on this a little bit, but how do you encourage people to have those conversations with someone that it's more of a long-term relationship, or even like a parent or something, where it's like, I don't want to cut you out of my life, but I need some sort of boundaries here?
Right. No, that's excellent. So I always tell clients, you can be unapologetically you with grace and kindness. And if you come into a conversation with a true heart of honoring the person that you're talking to, with really understanding where they are, and really trying to diffuse that situation with language. And so saying all that to say, the moment to have the boundary conversation is not when you're in the heat of emotion, not in the middle of a fight, not when you're crying, when you've calmed down, when you've processed what you need, and you can communicate that in a way that's not going to put the other, like in accusatory language, so to speak. You want to speak to the other person without accusing.
Yeah.
So you always want to affirm them and honor them for what they do bring to the table, for their positives, even if there's not much there. Find something, and always start that conversation with a positive, with affirmation of the other party. This is what I value you for. This is what, you bring to my life. This is why I'm better because of you, if you can find something. And then go into, however, I function this way, or I have found that I really need this. And so, in a way where you're not doing something wrong, because that puts people on the defensive, and then they can't hear you, and then it turns into a fight. So you really have to take responsibility for your language, your emotions. You don't have to apologize, but grace and kindness in that conversation, honor, and very engineered language usually will get you the results that you want with the least amount of damage, kind of mitigate damages there. And so and everybody has something of value. Everybody carries something that we can honor, even if it's tiny.
Yeah.
Right? Just really don't start that from a place of emotion, and express what you need. Do not say I'm sorry. That's something I always tell clients. Don't say I'm sorry, but Because when those words come out of your mouth, you signal to the other party that you are responsible, you've done something wrong. Everything that you're about to say is it's your fault and you're wrong and it's negative. And then they feel like they are empowered to judge you and criticize you and attack you. Really prefacing words with "I'm sorry" is opening the door in a very unhealthy way for your conversation. So don't say that if you can avoid that phrase.
Oh, that is really good, because I do think, especially even as women, we have this tendency to apologize just for existing, or just the things that come out of our mouth. So
sorry, but
and you know that you're about to have a difficult conversation, even if you're coming from a place of love. So it may feel natural to say, hey, I'm sorry, but I really felt this way when you said that. And it's like, hey, I really felt this way when you said that. Like, why should I apologize for my feelings?
Yes.
As long as I'm being respectful to you. And I love that. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about the opposite of this, where when someone is setting a boundary with you and you're having an issue with the boundary they set.
Yes.
Because I do think that the people you love, you should be able to respect their boundaries, but sometimes like some of those boundaries just may either like conflict with your boundaries, or it may just be something that doesn't feel good to you. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. So when you're on the other side of that conversation, there's always two things that you have to remember. First and foremost, you are not responsible for other people, right? So if they need that boundary, then they need that boundary. Your job is to love. It's not to judge others. It's not to figure them out. It's not to control them, criticize. You're not responsible for it. So you have to remember your place kind of in their process. If that's what they need and they're communicating it to you, no matter how great you think you are in their life, no matter how important you think you are, or how, to what capacity you think they need you, they are not your responsibility. You're only responsible for yourself. So a practical example of this, I have a 24-year-old son who has let me know in no uncertain terms, Mom, I love you, but I don't need you to mom me anymore. You're momming me. He's absolutely right. He doesn't need me in the same. I am no longer in his front seat.
Yeah.
I'm in the third row. I'm now lucky. So as a mom, in that moment, I have a choice. I can throw a fit. I can make him feel guilty. I can manipulate him, or I can respect that he's an adult and he doesn't need a mom anymore in the same capacity he did when he was 12. He may act like he's 12. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I have to honor, I'm not responsible for him anymore. So that's the first point. Second point is, if you're being triggered by somebody's boundary, the bigger question is, why is that boundary triggering you? You might need some internal work. Yeah. Do you have control issues? Do you have manipulation issues? Do you have some hurt and some dysfunction? That you're reliant on this person to fulfill a need that you just need to take care of on your own. So it's, you don't have to even be open and vulnerable about it, but internally, when someone is setting a boundary with you, if your first response is hurt or anger or rage or, whoa, step back and just do some self-exam. It's a good time for self-awareness. Why is this bothering me so bad? Where might I need healing? Yeah.
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 And I have this huge smile on my face, because you just blew something open that happened years ago for me in a relationship where I was trying to set the boundary of needing my own space. And he just felt so offended by the fact that I'm like, okay, like I see you this day, this, like I need these 2 days or this night for myself. And now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, that has to do with like his past relationships, but like knowing what I knew about them, and the fact that it was very much, oh, he's taking that as a sign that I'm doing this other thing and has nothing to do with me, but he's getting mad at my boundary. Wow.
Yeah. Because boundaries trigger us sometimes, right? Because they touch that place of pain that we've never dealt with. Yeah. And as long as we're in control and the relationship is going the way that we want it to, and we feel empowered, it's good. But when it shifts, again, anytime you set a boundary, anytime you show up in the truth and in the power of who you are, you place a demand on the relationships and the atmosphere around you. There's always a shift when you show up in a new way. And so if you're feeling the shift because somebody else has shown up in a new way, then maybe you need to ask yourself, why does this feel this way to me? Because they're really, like, if you, again, step back, Why are they making this decision? Why do they feel like they need it? They're trying to make the best decision for them. And then why is it affecting me in such a negative way?
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Do you have any other thoughts that you would like to share? Like, I feel like I just picked your brain hardcore for half an hour, but it was wonderful. And
oh, I love this conversation because, the truth of the matter is that we all have, a future ahead of us. And we all have dreams in our heart that we have carried, for years, some of us. And most of us are trying to get there, We might get set back along the way, things happen, there's things out of our control, but everybody that I've ever met is trying to get somewhere for the most part,
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, right? You should be trying to get somewhere. And so, and just, in 20 years of mentoring and coaching and teaching and training, I have found that the people who have the biggest struggle with reaching their goals are getting to that next place are people who have the inability to set boundaries. It's just like, they're just, pouring out and it's not going anywhere. They can't gain momentum.
I was really going to let you wrap up. But then one other thing popped into my head, and I feel like it's an important part of this conversation, and that's setting boundaries with yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Like what are your thought points on people? Because even if we are good with setting boundaries and respecting boundaries with other people, so often when it comes to any sort of self-maintaining or anything, we have an issue with that. Like, I say I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do that, and then we just don't. And then we go ahead and ignore what we told ourselves. So we break that trust with ourselves repeatedly. So what are your thoughts on setting boundaries with yourself for yourself?
Yeah, this is great because, again, you're right. We can set excellent boundaries with everyone else, and then we're an internal dumpster fire, right? It's really, we look good on paper, but we know better. So, that really boils down to identity. And that's where, when you know who you are and you know your strength, you know your superpower, you know the truth that you carry, and you know where you're going, it's very easy to honor the boundaries you set for yourself because you understand they're a mechanism to get you to a certain destination. What I find is those who struggle with the personal boundary, inner boundaries, they don't have a strong sense of identity. They haven't truly been able to put their fingers around and define their superpower and their truth and their strength. And so when that comes into focus, when you can really bring that lens over your life and where you're going and where you've been, that's really what drives the ability and the success with those inner boundaries. It's just really knowing who you are. And where you're going. And so then I would say you really need to do some identity work and find out what you're about, because every single person has a very specific, unique identity, just like your fingerprints.
Yeah.
It's a silly example, but it's true.
But I think that's honestly where so much of it starts. Like, you need to get right with yourself, figure out who you are, what you need, and then you can set the boundaries with yourself, set the boundaries with the other people in your life, and know that their boundaries aren't a reflection of you, but their own. Like, it goes all the way to the top.
And this is what I'm so passionate about. This is why I started Tri-Identity Coaching, because it is body, mind, spirit, or you could say spirit, mind, body. So you touch your place of identity, you shift your mindsets, and then as a result, your behaviors change because they're all interrelated. So you can start at one end and work this way, or you can start this way and work backwards. You're going to get there either way because it's all connected. We are not compartmentalized beings, but we are a convergence of our body, mind, and our spirit.
Yes, I'm such a strong believer in that. Because I feel like we really try to work in silos and live in silos, and that's just not realistic. That's not how it works at all. And I feel fortunate enough that I've built a business and I've built relationships with people that I can say, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so I'm cranky today. So if I say anything, please ignore me, please forgive me, or, oh, I don't feel good, or, oh, I'm in the best mood ever, I'm probably way too much energy for you right now. Whatever it is, I've been able to set those relationships up. And I think that is as a result of doing the self-work, saying what I will allow and what I won't allow, and knowing what's important to me. But I know it's not like that for everyone, where they just feel like, oh, this is a safe place for me. This is where I am able to show up the way that I want to and be who I am. And when you can do that, and when you can find those people, your people, it's such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Yes. Find your tribe.
Yes. I have the thing behind my desk that says, find your tribe, love them hard.
I can't read it, but that's fantastic.
You're literally hitting on all of the artwork I have, because this is a painting I did that I'm pointing, and I know they can't see and you can't see it, but it says, we accept the love we think we deserve. And it's the same as like with boundaries, like we allow what happens.
Yes.
This was so fun. This was wonderful. I just like want to have you on every week so we can talk about different things.
I'll come back. We'll do this again.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, I really appreciate it. And you have a gift for the audience, right?
Yes. If they are interested in talking more about identity, behaviors, mindsets, they can go straight to my website, tridentitycoaching.com, and they can book a free discovery session. And so just need to mention in our session that they heard me on the podcast, absolutely no charge for that. And yeah, we can talk about all things identity, boundaries, whatever is on their mind.
That'll be the next episode, identity.
Identity. We'll talk about that.
Well, thank you so much. And I will share the links to all of that in the show notes, because I definitely want people to go check you out and check out what you're doing in the world and just all of the brilliance that you have. This is so great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
This has been Creatives Crushing Anxiety. For more podcast episodes, visit diadarling.com. Did you enjoy this episode? Then go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. You can also subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Catch you next time.